I grew up with many stories about my grandfather, about Imam. Many stories of him as a hero, as a martyr. Often people would talk about the earthquake and how he inspired many people in the anti-apartheid struggle, especially in the Western Cape. I grew up with the book, The Killing of the Imam, and the cover of the book with the man falling down the stairs. And they would talk about him as the Imam, right? He would have this title. So for me as a kid, I thought, must have been an amazing, an important man.
في عام 1955 في اليوم الذي يحتفل فيه المسلمون بذكرى المولد النبوي الشريف، انتخب الحاج عبد الله هارون إماما على أحد مساجد ضواحي كيب تاون. يعد هذا المنصب من أهم مناصب المجتمع الإسلامي هناك، فهو إمام ومدرس قرآن وعلوم شرعية وناصح للصغير والكبير. وكان الإمام عبد الله هارون أصغر إمام يتسلم ذلك المنصب عن عمر 32 سنة. ذا إطلالة عصرية ببدلة غربية. اعتقد كثيرون أن هذا الشخص لا يصلح أن يكون إماما.
What happened was that there was an opportunity at the local masjid in Claremont. And many of these positions, they have elections. And literally he won by a small margin because there were other candidates as well. And they say even his father was one who voted against him because they felt age is an important thing for a person to become an imam. They did not consider knowledge and wisdom as important things. They considered age as an important thing. But Imam proved them all wrong. He had far more wisdom and far more insight than even the older ones that existed in Cape Town.
كانت جنوب افريقيا دولة فريدة في القارة الافريقية، فقد حكمت من قبل اقلية بيضاء عنصرية متعصبة. قسم اهل البلاد عرقيا ما بين ابيض وهندي وملون وما يسمى بافريقي. وبناء على فهمهم للانجيل، رأوا ان للبيض الاحقية في حكم الجميع.
If you want to understand what is apartheid, look at Israel, occupied Palestine. It's a settler community that came from outside. They built the infrastructure, and a very efficient infrastructure as well. And now they say, we own the land, we are going to rule you. So in very simple terms, apartheid was a settler community who had been here for 300 years. So when apartheid became an official state ideology in 1948, significantly at the time of the creation of the State of Israel. And there was a relationship between apartheid South Africa and Zionist Israel. But what apartheid did was, it was white on the one side and what they considered non-white. It's not a term that I accept because non-white means you are a non-person. But for the sake of reference, but they took the non-white and further divided them into three basic groups. Africans, or as they referred to them as natives, coloreds, and Indians. And they gave each of these three groups different or lesser privileges. So the Indians were probably the most privileged of the three groups. Then we had the colours, and then we had the Africans or the natives.
Muslims in apartheid were, for a long period, they did not take a very political stand. They were rather loyal in loyalty to the ruling system. There is an interesting quotation that is written in the Muslim News. This is a religious Muslim newspaper in '64, and they wrote, "Has the government forbidden the worship of Allah and the spreading of Islam? Has the government closed down or ordered the demolishment of any mosque in a declared white area? If the government has ordered us as Muslims to desert the faith of our forefathers, then our ulama would have been the first to urge us to resist even to death."
And welcome to Voice of the Cape Drive Time. I'm Shafiq Morton. Assalamu alaikum. University of the Western Cape receives a grant to promote gender equity. Our weekly Africa report. And after 5, Jamal Khashoggi, 1 year on. What's happening?
In fact, the interesting thing about Imam Haaroon, that when he started to become politically aware and when he started to talk about political awareness, and remember, political awareness in South Africa in those days was about basic human rights. Unfortunately, and this is a big blot on our community, a lot of the ulama of the time, a lot of the community elders of the time told him to keep quiet. They said he was going and doing things that was going to cause trouble.
خلال دراسته داخل جنوب افريقيا لم يتطرق اي من شيوخ عبد الله هارون للسياسه، وبسبب استيلاء نظام الفصل العنصري على العديد من المناطق خسر الإمام منزله، وكاد أن يخسر المسجد الذي أسس فيه مكتبة ومدرسة لتعليم اللغة العربية، فتنازل الإمام عن منزله، إلا أنه وقف ضد قرار الاستيلاء على المسجد، وحشد الناس وراء رأيه لتتراجع السلطة عن قرارها خوفا من اندلاع حرب دينية. منذ تلك اللحظة بدا واضحا أن السياسة لن تترك هارون حتى لو أراد هارون تركها.
I think one needs to first of all look at the Imam's political activism. It didn't just suddenly happen where he realized, look, you know, there's a political struggle and I have to get involved. It was a process for the Imam as well. And the process started when the Imam, because of his social justice conscience, he was a man who had empathy for people who were suffering, people that were afflicted, in his own community, in his own jama'ah as an Imam. And he used to be a sales representative for a company that used to sell sweets. And he used to go into the townships and he used to see the conditions in the townships. And he started interacting with the people.
He was a consultant, if one would say, to this company called Roundtrees, and that this gave him the opportunity to be able to go into the different townships. He used this opportunity, yes, to sell them chocolates. You know, they probably had shops, but he also used this opportunity to find out what is happening to the families of the people that has been arrested and imprisoned without trial, or they just disappear without a trace. And he used this opportunity to deepen his political circles, and also contacting and affiliating himself to what was currently happening.
اخترق الإمام حدود الفصل العنصري بدخوله مناطق العمالة الإفريقية المغلقة ليوصل رسالة الإسلام، فتعرف لأول مرة على أعضاء مؤتمر عموم إفريقيا باك الذين كانوا يخططون لوقف التعامل بقوانين تصاريح العبور للإفريقيين. وجد الإمام نفسه ينخرط في السياسة ويلتفت إلى أحوال الناس غير المسلمين من ذوي البشرة السوداء، وتعرف على أعضاء من منظمات متعددة تعمل على تقويض نظام الفصل العنصري.
Whereas Imam was one of those people who said that we are all human beings, that we must embrace each other, that when we suffer together. So not only did Imam transcend the barrier of madhab, that he actually brought people together from different backgrounds. He ignored and was not interested in whether you were from India or you were from Malaysia or from Africa. That was not important for him. Right? The other things that he did was he even went further than that, and he said if there are people who are Christian in background,
أوجبت السلطة البيضاء على الأفارقة حملة تصاريح عبور فرضت فيما مضى على المستعبدين عند الخروج من محيط منازل المالكين لهم بحجة السيطرة على العمالة الحرة. فقرر حزب باك عدم حمل تلك البطاقات، فاستجاب آلاف الناس لتلك الدعوة. وفي يوم الأول من آذار مارس 1960 قدموا أنفسهم لمراكز الشرطة لاعتقالهم كطريقة سلمية للاحتجاج. لكن وعلى الرغم من سلمية الاحتجاج قتلت الشرطة 69 شخصا بالرصاص في بلدة شاربفيل، مما أدى إلى أعمال شغب وعصيان مدني هو الأكبر في تاريخ كيب تاون. فأحضرت السلطة الجيش وفرضوا حصارا أدى إلى المجاعة في بعض القرى. تأثر الإمام كثيرا بهذه الحادثة ووجد طريقا لإدخال الطعام للناس هناك. كان هذا أول عمل يخالف فيه هارون أوامر السلطة بشكل مباشر، مما جعله تحت ملاحظة الشرطة السرية.
Look, so here's one of the more interesting things about him. So firstly, he had challenges within his community. But clearly many people were aware that this man was not moving in comfortable circles. That not only was he speaking against the apartheid government, but that he was actually actively working to bring them down. By the 1960s, the apartheid government had already banned 2 of the major political organizations, meaning it was illegal to be a member of them. So Sharpeville massacre is one of those points in our history that separates, that stands as a beacon of the challenge to the apartheid government. So when Imam Harun joined up with, and here's the interesting thing, he worked closely with these people. He never joined the organizations. He was very close with them. But the apartheid government, when he saw that those people are from that background, they immediately associated him with them.
من أغرب فصول التاريخ الإنجليزي حكايتهم مع دولة جنوب إفريقيا. في عام 1961 قررت بريطانيا إعلان دولة جنوب إفريقيا المستقلة، لكن بقيادة الحكومة البيضاء دون الرجوع لرأي الأكثرية. فعمت البلاد احتجاجات عارمة، وشارك الإمام بانخراطه في الاحتجاجات بشكل مباشر. أولا من المنبر، حيث طلب من المسلمين الصوم 3 أيام اعتراضا على القرار التعسفي ومشاركة في الإضرابات بطريقة إسلامية تقليدية. وثانيا بتأمين بيوت آمنة للمطاردين من الأحزاب السياسية الذين لاحقتهم الحكومة ووضعتهم على قائمة الإرهاب. وقام بعقد بعض الاجتماعات السرية في بيته. في تلك الفترة كان الإمام هارون من أكثر الشخصيات المؤثرة، وقد وجد في ذلك فرصة لربط نضاله بالإسلام وتعاليمه، وقد كان ذلك سببا لدخول أعداد كبيرة في الإسلام. ذلك النشاط الذي قام به لم يسبقه إليه أي مسلم في جنوب إفريقيا قبل ذلك.
He just wanted to make sure the well-being are taken care of. But this also opened his eyes and his mind into what was happening and how cruel the apartheid government was during the time of apartheid. And with my father's involvement with the African people in Langa, in Nyanga and Gugulethu, he obviously met with brothers that saw how he communicated with him. And I remember my mother always used to say that when we were living in the same area, not in this particular house, but in a different house, they used to come and visit my father many times at the house. Or many times they will come and my father will take them away.
استمر الإمام بنشاطه السري والدعوي حتى قدوم عام 1966، حيث قرر الذهاب لأداء مناسك الحج مع زوجته السيدة حليمة. لكن هذا الحج كان أيضا ذا صبغة سياسية، حيث توجه إلى لندن بناء على طلب من بعض القيادات في منظمة مؤتمر عموم افريقيا، دون علم الإمام عن سبب ضرورة حضوره إلى لندن، حيث كان الحزب قد قرر الكفاح المسلح. التقى الإمام بعدها بالأب كانون جوهان كولينز، القس في كنيسة سينت بول، الذي طلب من الإمام القيام بتوزيع الأموال على ذوي المعتقلين والضحايا السياسيين في كيب تاون. وافق الإمام وقال إن الواجب الديني يفرض عليه مساعدة المحتاجين، وأرسلت معه قيادات حزب باك شريط كاسيت كرسالة مسجلة لأعضاء الحزب هناك.
When he came in London, he met with a priest by the name of Canon John Collins. And this man was the leader of an organization that channeled money into South Africa and gave money particularly to the families of those people who were detained under apartheid. And he found in Imam Haaron an honorable and honest man with whom he could convey the money and support people. And so Imam became, as a direct challenge to the apartheid government. They saw that if we arrest the father of this house and Imam comes and he brings food to that house, he pays their rent, he looks after their children, then they are defeated. And so they were very angry about how Imam continued to help, especially those people who were in prison on Robben Island and in various prisons.
You see this newspaper which shows another part of his life, which he was a travel specialist. You build up this this image of this man who's an imam, father, political activist, and he worked for Wilson's Roundtrees. But then, curiously, he's also like a travel specialist. So what is he doing? For me, he's hustling, right? He's just like doing a number of things in order to to get around to meet people. To maybe it was a way for him to travel.
في طريق عودته كان متأكدا أن نشاطه قد وصل للشرطة السرية وأن المراقبة عليه ستشتد. وقد علم عن موت 4 أشخاص في الحبس بررت الشرطة بأنهم انتحروا. إلا أنه كان سعيدا بما أنجزه في رحلة الحج ولم يكترث للخطر، لكنه بقي حذرا. باشر الإمام في أعماله الخيرية وتوزيع الأموال على المحتاجين وأهالي المأسورين، لكن الإمام بدأ يشعر أن الرقابة عليه قد زادت. 1969 في يوم المولد النبوي وذكرى تنصيبه كإمام، وبعد تجهزه ليخطب بآلاف من الناس، تم القبض على الإمام. أخبروه أنهم يريدونه في زيارة سريعة، وبعد أخذه إلى المركز الأمني تم إخباره بأنه متهم بقضايا إرهاب وأنهم يحتاجون منه معلومات عن رحلته الأخيرة. وفي المساء عادوا به إلى المنزل وفتشوه بشكل كامل ومنعوه من الكلام مع عائلته وعادوا به إلى المركز الأمني.
He continued to do that which people considered was very dangerous. And people remember Imam at different ways. But that part which was the most dangerous, he took all on himself. And he was always conscious that that the security police were watching him. He was also very conscious that the security police had amongst his Jama and in various places that he went amongst the Muslims, they had people who were paid to tell stories about him. But he was aware that there were always cars standing near his house, white men sitting, watching what he was doing. So in that way, he was aware that they were interested in what he was doing, and he used to take a lot of precautions. So if he needed to go and see people who were members of band organizations, he'll ask one student, well, take me from point A to point B. Then he'll ask separately to another one, come fetch me by point B and take me to point C. So he was very aware of these types of precautions that needed to be taken.
استمر التحقيق مع الإمام بسبب نشاطاته السياسية لفترة منذ اليوم الأول وبشكل يومي صباحا ومساء. سألوه عن توزيعه منشورات في الحج لتعريف المسلمين في شتى بقاع الأرض بقضية النضال جنوب الإفريقي، وسألوه عن لقائه ببعض الأسماء في مصر والسعودية، ومن ثم لقائه مع أعضاء باك في لندن، والتقائه بالأب كولينز وأخذه $4,000 منه لمساعدة عائلات المعتقلين السياسيين. لكن الإمام وبعد تفاجئه من معرفتهم بكافة تفاصيل زيارته للندن رفض إعطاء أي معلومات وطالب بتحويله للمحاكمة. لكن التحقيق استمر لعدة شهور.
The memory I have of that day of the arrest was, it's still very much etched in my mind. And I remember the police coming the morning to our home. I wasn't at school, and I remember my father telling my mother that he's going with them to Caledon Square, that they want to speak to him at the Caledon Square. That is one of the prison in the city of Cape Town.
The message that the police gave to the community, they could see that the Imam had this power to galvanize this community, which is very small but quite strong economically and strong in history in the country, right? And very close community. And so I think it was this preemptive strike that they wanted to take him or to shake him up before he had the chance to gather a body of people.
Imam Hārūn was part of board of Muslim News, the newspaper, and one should expect that when one member of the board is held in detention that there is an article about it. But that was interesting that they did not really react on this. And they wrote, Muslim News is not a political paper and does not publish political views on news. It only concerns itself with the religious and social needs of the Muslim community. Whatever political views Imam Hārūn expresses is entirely his own views and not in the capacity as editor of the Muslim News. It's a big distance that they make, and it's we are clean and it's his problem and not our problem. And I think this tells you a lot about the Muslim position.
From the 28th of May until the 19th of August, he was kept in one place, which is now referred to as Cape Town Central Police Station. And he was kept there without there being any contact with anybody. And so they would say that like normal people go to work, they'll come in at 8 o'clock. And they would question the Imam from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then they say, sometimes I used to do night shift. Then I'd interrogate Imam from 6 o'clock in the evening till 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay? So this was the round the clock, the way they used to continue to interrogate him.
What my father did do, he managed to smuggle out letters out of prison. How he did that was that the flask and the thermal flask inside and the outer part of the flask could separate. And then my mum sent him biscuits to prison, cream cracker biscuits. I don't know if you know about cream cracker biscuits, but on the cardboard he used to write the letters addressed to her and letters addressed to the late Barney Desai. He was a member of the PAC, the Pan-African National Congress movement. So that is how the letters got out of prison. So the police, they never picked up that, but he smuggled out quite a few letters.
This particular paper is, I think, where one of the first notes first start coming out. He writes on these papers, and he gets it smuggled out by his young son Muhammad, who comes to bring him some food and drinks, and he manages to smuggle this information out to my father, who was living in London. The effect of the letters on my father, for us as children, was very traumatic. He felt somehow that he was responsible because the Imam had been to see him and they'd organised to do certain things together, arrange for money, for support for the people inside the country. And he felt that if the Imam hadn't been there to see him, that the Imam would still be alive. And this tortured him. It made him very depressed for many years. He had to document this story. It had a very devastating effect on our family.
وبعد يأس المحققين من أخذ أي معلومة منه، تحول التحقيق لجلسات قاسية من التعذيب المستمر. فكان الضرب المستمر كل يوم حتى الإغماء شيئا روتينيا. كانوا يغطون رأس الإمام ليشعر بعدها بأحدهم يمسك أصابعه، ثم يسمعهم يقولون 25 فولتا، ويسمع صوت آلة تعمل. يشعر بجسده يتشنج من الكهرباء. لنجرب 200 فولت، والإمام يشعر بعظامه تذوب مثل الماء. المحققون يصرخون: زودنا بأسماء، أسماء. لكن الاسم الوحيد الذي كرره: بلال، بلال، أحد أحد.
Mr. Barney Desai became the person who then writes a book about his life later on. And in there he told about two types of questions that they were asking. The one that they were asking was largely about who was he giving money to. Canon John Collins put money into your account. Then you gave the money to who? You know, those types of questions. And so, of course, given the length of time that Imam was held, it was clear that Imam did not give them the answers they wanted. The second issue is that they considered Imam Harun as somebody, as a recruiter of young people, which he was sending outside of the country to get military training, with which they would then fight the apartheid government. So in there is a clear reference to the military wing of the Pan-Africanist Congress in one of his letters, and then of course a clear indication to CC, which is Canon Collins.
Unfortunately, there was a spy for the apartheid regime within their group. They'd been very close friends, like a family living together. And the Imam inadvertently found out about this spy when he heard the special branch over speaking and saying, "Does Barney know that Kenny sold him out?" Now, that made perfect sense because of all the other people that were in the room. But this is something the Imam overheard. So this kind of information is contained in this part of the document. It's the other side of the cracker. So I think that this information, when they do open an inquest into the death of the Imam, we will now be able to lay to rest who actually betrayed him.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا رب اغفر لي خطاياي، توكل بزوجتي وأولادي، إنهم بحاجتك الآن أكثر من أي وقت. يا رحيم، جراحي تؤلمني ولا أستطيع احتمال هذا التعذيب والمعاناة أكثر. يا رحيم، خذ روحي واترك جسدي لهؤلاء المعذبين، اغفر ضعفي. يا رحيم، اتركني أموت الآن وأطلق روحي للحرية واجعل بلادي حرة. بعد 133 يوما من التعذيب والمعاناة، في 27 من أيلول سبتمبر 1969 استشهد الإمام هارون.
Imam's body was found in the morning of 1969 in Maitland Police Station. So the local policeman who was there opened up and he found Imam's body slumped on the floor. And the security police informed his wife that Imam had died.
Where I go to the police station where he was found dead, where he spent the last few months. And I went, not, to see where he lived his final moments, but also to see these stairs that they said he fell down. There's like 2 or 3 steps, not very big. Yeah, here they are.
Witnesses, Speaker and his brother.
So, yeah, it's a space that also, over all the years of people talking about Imam Haroon, what he did, had never been explored. So, yeah, I wanted to go there myself. It was, moving for me because I felt some sadness, but also I felt good. I felt kind of connected, more connection with him in a way, as a grandson.
We were informed as a family that our father, when he was killed by falling down a few flights of stairs. And as his children, we never believed that our father was killed. We knew that he was tortured because when the body came home on the 29th of September of 1969, my brother remembers very clearly that his body was very bruised. So he was badly tortured. I didn't see the bruised body, but all I can tell you, I saw his face. And then when I went to greet my father, I remember somebody in the family picked me up, and I remember taking my hands and I cupped his cheeks with my hands, and I looked at him, and a part of his face was sad, but a part of his face was happy, but there was a sense of peace.
What independent pathology reports also indicated was there were serious injuries. For example, a number of ribs were broken. Imam Haroon had a blood clot, a hemotema, at the base of the skull, of the spine, I beg your pardon, at the base of the spine, at the bottom of the back. So Imam Haroon's, and if one looks at the extent of his injuries, was not just given a few blows over a period of a day. Pathology reports indicate that he was actually beaten over a period of days and sustained beatings over probably 10 or 14 days before he actually died.
The funeral showed a totally different response because for the Muslim community, for the individuals, let's put it like this also, in the Muslim community you had the impression they just woke up from a deep sleep, And the funeral was much more than a funeral procession. It was rather a political demonstration. And you just imagine, it's 30,000 people who just came from all over, all directions and attended the funeral.
The people have walked with Imam's body, with his bier, for over 8 kilometers. And they had carried him, and over 30,000 people, it was reported, had followed him, and over 30,000 people of all walks of life. And they came to this graveyard. And one of the strangest things happened at that graveyard, and that is that the first time the security police themselves wanted to decide where to bury Imam Harun. And they chose to bury him right on top, where people with no families or people who are not known, especially criminals, would be buried. And they stood there and they had dug a grave for him. But the people of Cape Town, and the Muslims in particular, decided that he will be buried in this prime position, right in front, amongst the leaders, both religious leaders and Muslim political leaders, right here in front in the Maqbara. And by the time the security police realized, he had been buried already, because there were so many people they couldn't see what was happening. That night, young people thought that the security police would dig up his grave and take him back on top. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had his own plans. And for the first time ever in recorded history, Cape Town had experienced a massive earthquake in a distant place, but the tremors were felt right here in this Maqbara. It was such a powerful tremor that the security police ran away.
So in terms of the way nature responded to the janazah, the burial of Imam Harun, we always extracted an example of God's presence, of God's anger, and also the affirmation that this was a child of God. This, the Shahid was a child of God. So nature affirmed for us was a sign, and it was the voice, the earthquake was the voice of God and of the Creator.
The fact that the file is not closed. The file has never been closed on Steve Biko, for example. The file has not been closed on Ahmad Timal, for example. So many people who died in detention, we still haven't got the answers. And even the Truth and Reconciliation Commission couldn't get close to the truth. And some families, like Imam Harun's family, decided not to testify at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission because they didn't feel it was going to get them anywhere.
Of course, we know we lived in the era of apartheid and the Nationalist Party at that time, a white supremacist government which suppressed the people of the land. But here we capture those who died in apartheid detention, specifically from the year 1963 until the year 1990. However, you'll find that some of the people who are captured here are some of the heroes of the liberation struggle. You see people like the name in 1963, Suleiman Saluje, and then in 1965, Gaga Ngeni. We look at later on, 69, Imam Abdullah Harun. You find Michael Chivute, James Lenko, and 71, Ahmad Timol. There are numerous people throughout the history. These were stalwarts in the struggle. And we find that it captures all those 117 people of whom we know that have been documented as having been killed in apartheid prisons. So as we say, we recognize these heroes in remembering Imam Abdullah Harun. On Imam Abdullah Harun Road, we remind the world to not forget those who died in detention.
Sometimes reality, scripts, produces a better script than fiction. So the passing of, we call her Auntie Halima Harun. The passing of Auntie Halima Harun was probably no scriptwriter could have written that script. Yes, you know, we can say that things happen, Allah knows best. But we as ordinary human beings, we want to put meanings to things. And I think it's important to give meaning to anything that happens in our life. And I will unapologetically give meaning to the fact that Imam Harun and his wife were buried on the same day, more or less at the same time. It's probably a message from a spiritual world, if you want to put it that way, that we have to actually accept and give significance to.
We are busy arranging the exhibition on the life of Imam Abdullah Harun, and we are busy making sure that the story of the life of Imam Harun follows a chronological pattern. The boards cover different aspects of his life, such as commemorating his torture and murder in detention.
And 50 years afterwards, that memory is still alive, and that perpetuation of the struggle and the memory of struggle always continues. For wherever there is a need for justice, there's a need to respond, to be able to manifest justice wherever there's oppression and corruption and injustice. And here we see at the foot of Signal Hill and Lion's Head, we find here the artwork depicting the mosque of Imam Abdullah Harun. Don't forget, the mosque remained there, but the government in that time removed all the people from that area so that it became a white area and Muslims could not stay there. But up till today, people went for Salah, for Jumu'ah, and it continued until now. It's still a masjid. In fact, we had the commemoration, 50th commemoration at the masjid. Then we see this is the prison in town where he was questioned and interrogated, and we show some of the buildings, governmental structures, to indicate how there was this overwhelming attack on the masjid, but nonetheless, this has survived. It's in the foreground. And in fact, this artwork won the second prize in the international competition.
This is one of the original versions of the book that my father wrote called The Killing of the Imam. He wrote this book, I think, to keep the Imam's memory alive, but also for him. It was a cathartic experience to write this book because he felt so guilty about the fact that the Imam was tortured and killed in detention because he'd been with my father and John Collins and other people. To promote the book in as many forms as they can, so the people, the youngsters who weren't around 50 years ago, people from all faiths, but even more so for those from following Islam, should know who the martyr was, who sacrificed himself for the struggle.
هذا الكتاب يحكي قصة عبد الله هارون، الزعيم المسلم الذي أصبح واحدا من الضحايا الرئيسيين لنظام الفصل العنصري. قد يكون هذا بسبب جمعياته الخيرية أو بسبب زيارته إلى المملكة المتحدة وارتباطه ارتباطا وثيقا بكانون كولينز وغيره من مناضلي الحرية.